Hi, and welcome to today's session on collaborative note taking in the college classroom. My name is Mel Katz, and I am the Accommodations Support Specialist for Curriculum and Assessment here in the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Today, our objective is to go over approaches to note taking for students with and without accommodations. As noted before, this presentation covers three approaches to note taking. Those include collaborative notes, guided notes, and peer notes. Although students with accommodation plans who are affiliated with the Accessibility Resource Center, or ARC, will continue to receive the accommodations listed in their memos, these approaches to note taking are beneficial for all students in the class. You'll see that below each of the note taking methods, there is a radar that goes from green to red. This is intended to be a quick look at the note taking method in terms of how much preparation is required to implement this practice in the classroom. Collaborative notes and guided notes require minimal preparation and upkeep throughout the semester. Peer notes require a bit more organization, but is still beneficial to use in the classroom. Before looking at each of the specific note taking methods, it's helpful to have context as to why this conversation matters. On the slide is information from the Accessibility Resource Center covering the amount of peer note taker requests that have come in over the past 2 years or the last 4 semesters. You can see that in 3 out of these 4 semesters, the requests hovered around the mid 100s, with a large increase in fall 2023 going up to 254 requests for a peer note taker. Understanding this data requires us to think about three things. The first is that these requests come from the students when they create their accommodation plans with their accessibility specialist. In this, we have to consider that students may or may not request notes. Another layer of that is that even if a student has a memo, it is their responsibility to share that information with their instructor. If students don't share that information with the instructor, then the instructor may not implement peer note taking in the classroom. The second piece to consider is that these numbers only include the students who are requesting the note taker. But for us, we want to think about the peer who is taking the notes as well as the peer who is requesting the notes. We want to consider both of these when we think about the number of students involved in peer note taking. And the third thing we want to consider is how this number multiplies by the number of class meetings that take place. Note taking isn't typically a one-time thing. We know that notes may not be taken in every single class session if there's an exam, a project presentation, or something else going on. But the majority of classes are going to require notes. Therefore, when we think about these numbers, we want to make sure that we're focusing on the fact that this is the number of students requesting a peer note taker, though the number is much larger when we consider how it's implemented in the classroom. The first method of note taking we will cover is collaborative note taking. And collaborative note taking encourages students to take notes in a shared, often digital platform. So, thinking about when to use collaborative note taking, there are first some classroom considerations. What's great about collaborative note taking is that there is minimal preparation. It's easily maintained during the semester by creating a collaborative platform that can be used and then ensuring that students have access to it throughout the semester. Collaborative note taking also works best in a small to medium sized class. This is because students are working all together on either a document or in a folder, and it allows all students a chance to contribute. There are also some Canvas considerations when it comes to using collaborative notes. So, first, there is the collaborations tool in Canvas. This is embedded directly in the LMS and allows you to create a Google Doc for students to share to create collaborative notes. What's great is that this can also be assigned to groups in Canvas so that you can assign note-taking groups that align with potential other groups in the class. There's also the redirect tool. This is an integration in Canvas that can be added to the navigation bar, and it adds a custom link. So students can go right to, say, a shared Google folder from the course navigation menu without having to look elsewhere to access their collaborative notes. Collaborative note taking can be approached in a plethora of ways. Here we have three digital platforms for collaborative note taking that may work in your classroom. So, the first is using shared Google Docs. This would be providing students with a Google Doc that they all contribute to. What's great about this is that there are a few options in terms of how students can contribute. The first is that students can contribute anonymously if you want to have a lower stakes shared note taking method. Students could alternatively add their name or initials to whatever notes that they contribute to the shared note taking document. Students could also use a color coding legend to make it clear who is contributing what notes to the document. And as an instructor, you could also look back at the version history to see who has added what to the Google Doc. This is a great way to see that all students are contributing in equitable ways to the shared notes. An alternative is to use a shared Google Drive if having all students work in one Google Doc is simply too much. This allows students to upload separate documents, but for it all to be hosted in one shared folder. Similar to the approach with Google Docs, students can add their name or initials, but they'll do it in the document title instead of in specific notes within the document. What's great here as well is that using Google Drive allows you to organize the uploads either by class or by week or by any other method that meets the needs of the course. And finally, you can use subfolders and labels. Folders can be color coded by topic or week, and subfolders can be labeled in similar ways. This is great because the labeling system can mirror the Canvas setup if, for example, you're using modules so that students can easily find the collaborative notes. Outside of Google, an option is to use a collaborative board, and one example of that is the platform Padlet. Padlet has a free version that allows you to create 3 boards without having to have a formal subscription. What's great about Padlet is that students can upload any document types. They can upload to the shared board a Google Doc, a Microsoft Word document, a PDF, or anything else that allows them to share where they took notes. Additionally, students can upload media. They can add videos, they can add links, or anything else that may make the note-taking experience a bit more robust. These can be organized using columns, similar to how a Google Drive will allow you to organize by topic or theme or any other method. And what's great is you can track student contributions by attribution. As long as students log into Padlet with their TCNJ account, their names will show up on anything that they contribute to the board, which will again allow you to see who is contributing what to the collaborative note taking. Another approach to collaborative note taking is using guided or annotated notes. Guided note taking provides students with structure when taking notes because they'll use either an outline, template, headings, or sections to categorize content and highlight the relationship between concepts. So, thinking about when to use guided or annotated notes. First, some classroom considerations. This does require what we're calling a medium amount of preparation because materials do have to be prepared ahead of class. If students are using guided notes and, for example, it's an outline, that has to be prepared and provided to students before the start of class. If students are annotating pre-existing notes, such as PowerPoint or Google Slides, those also have to be prepared and posted ahead of class. This works really well in medium to large class sizes because it guides students through lectures and activities. Because there are many students and it may be difficult for them to contribute to a single note taking method, this allows students to have a sense of community and sharing in their notes, and that they're all following the same outline, but have ownership over the construction of their own notes. And thinking about some of the digital considerations and how this can be done, the first way that this could be approached with students is to provide students with a Google Slides link. They can be linked as an external URL, for example, in modules, and the URL for the slides can be changed so that students can make a forced copy of the document. This would allow them to annotate the notes either directly on the slides or in the comments section throughout the course. And the other option is to do a PowerPoint upload. This can be uploaded as a traditional file upload in Canvas, and students can then download a copy to add annotations similar to slides, whether they be in the slides or notes. If there is certain content that you don't want students to have access to, say your own notes in either Google Slides or PowerPoint, you can create a student copy that removes those notes and provide that copy either in Canvas or in another shared platform. That way, students are free to take their own guided or annotated notes. There are a variety of ways to approach guided note taking, and here we are going to review 3 potential structures for guided note taking documents and or ways to structure your lecture slides to align with the guided notes. So the first way is to organize around concepts or themes. This is great when you want to organize for core concepts that are within a mini unit or a section of the broader course. You can use headings and subheadings to organize the notes, whether those reflect content or reflect the days in which students are going to be reviewing certain material. This is great because it helps students identify patterns and ideas by collecting notes from across multiple classes in a single document. And as the instructor, you can decide the length of notes by determining how many headings and subheadings you want to use and how much of the course content is covered in this subsection of notes. Another approach is to use a lesson outline. This works well when you want to have notes for a single class session. Typically, a lesson outline for guided notes will follow a sequential order, and it's important that they align with the lecture slides so that everything that's gone over in the slides, students have an opportunity to take notes on in their own note-taking document. It's great here as well to include learning activities rather than just lecture material. This encourages students to see that there's value in note taking around the discussions they engage in, the activities they do, and any other aspects of a class session. And a final approach to guided note taking could be around key terminology. This could be used for an entire unit of study or even for a course. And in that case, it would be used across class sessions. What's great is that students can connect terms to concepts they are studying, especially terms that they're going to revisit throughout the course. And to connect back to collaborative note taking, key terminology allows students to work together or solo. For example, there could be a collaborative note taking document that acts as a sort of glossary for the class, or students could have a set of key terminology in their individual guided notes or slides if they're annotating materials. Another approach to collaborative note taking is to implement peer notes in the classroom. Peer notes are beneficial to students who are affiliated with the Accessibility Resource Center, or ARC, because it offers them summaries, outlines, and supplemental notes from a designated peer note taker. So, thinking about when to use supplemental peer note taking. First, the classroom considerations. This does require medium preparation. As noted below that, peer notes are used with students who are affiliated with ARC and have documented accommodations. Therefore, the medium preparation comes in organizing who is going to be a peer note taker for the student with a documented accommodation. However, peer notes can also be used with other forms of note taking to encourage collaboration and community amongst the whole class. And then some of the pedagogical considerations of peer notes. Peer notes align with universal design in the sense that there's flexible use of notes to learn in a variety of ways. By being provided supplemental notes, students can see how other students are approaching their note taking and review the same information in different ways. Additionally, this benefits all students, including the student receiving the peer notes as well as the peer note taker. It encourages participation and builds community in the classroom by thinking about sharing information among students and looking at the classroom as a community of learners rather than siloing learning into individual students. There are some considerations for implementing peer note taking in the classroom and making it a successful process for both the peer note taker and the student receiving the notes. The first thing is to consider students who have pretty regular attendance. Obviously, there are going to be cases where students cannot attend class, but the idea is that students should have no scheduling conflicts and know that they will be present for most, if not all, of the classes. It's important to set this clear expectation to students when they offer to be a peer note taker. However, because we know those absences do happen, it's important to identify a backup person who can act as a peer note taker when the original peer note taker is not present for class. And finally, it's important to check in with both students, both the peer note taker and the student receiving the notes, to make sure that the peer note taker is being supported and has access to the resources they need, and that the student receiving the notes is receiving the notes in a way that works for them and that meets their accommodation. Another thing to express to students ahead of time is the requirements around the turnaround time. It's important that peer notes are shared within 24 to 48 hours so they can be useful to the student receiving the notes. It's important to provide clear guidance to students about how the notes will be transferred from them as a peer note taker to the students receiving the notes. And this process should involve the peer note taker, thinking about what's the best way for them to share information. And most importantly, it's essential to have consistency in the process. Perhaps there's a shared Google folder where notes go. Perhaps the notes are emailed directly to the student and CC'd the instructor. Whatever the process is, it should be consistent so that the student receiving the notes always knows where to go to find them, and the student sharing the notes knows how to do that. And finally, it's important to express to students having organized notes in the peer note taking process. They can identify a procedure for note taking, whether that be guided notes or collaborative notes. It's important that students implement a labeling system so that it's clear where the notes are from. This could include, for example, the date, the class session title, or any other information that aligns with the syllabus and/or Canvas. It's important to ensure access for sharing, even something as simple as making sure that the document is viewable by the student receiving the notes. And what's great about peer note taking is it can be used with other methods. For example, it can be used with guided note taking if the student creates guided notes and shares them with the student who receives this accommodation. The student receiving the accommodation can also use their peer notes and then check the collaborative notes in the class to see if there's anything that they want to add to their own notes. One of the main goals of having students take notes in class is that they actually use the notes, whether it be for studying for an exam, reviewing material, or simply building community with others around the course content. There are various methods that can be used to align notes and lectures to encourage effective learning outcomes in the classroom. 6 of them will be reviewed here. The first is to open each class with an agenda or outline. This can be a session overview or a list of the topics and subtopics that will be covered in class. This allows students to know how to structure their notes and prepare them for the class ahead. While giving a lecture, it's important to use structural cues. These can be verbal cues or visual cues in the slide. The purpose of this is that students can identify important information and not feel as though they have to transcribe the entire lesson in their notes. Third, it's important to pace the lecture with pauses. Integrating short, regular pauses into a lecture allows students to catch up on any missed notes, make sure that they understand the material, or ask any clarifying questions. And these can be aligned with slides or activities so that the pauses feel natural, whether it be, for example, when moving from one slide to the next or between activities during a class session. It's also important to practice interactive learning, such as asking open ended questions or connecting the material to various applications. This encourages students to see that they're not taking notes solely for the purpose of the class, but taking notes to actually apply their learning both in class and in other contexts. One great idea is to determine and provide students with visual aids ahead of time, especially when it comes to complex visuals. This allows students time to annotate, label, and study the complex visual aids, whether it be a graph or an image, so that they're not spending as much time simply copying down the visual aid in the first place. And finally, it's great to allow time for notes review, whether it be at the end of a session or when transitioning between activities. Students can review key lecture points, they can ask clarifying questions, and they can also compare notes with their peers. And comparing notes here isn't intended to mean comparison in the sense of competition, but comparison in the sense of clarifying any uncertain points, making sure they have all of the essential concepts written down, and any other reason that students may want to work with others to review their notes. While this presentation has focused on things that instructors can do to implement note taking in the classroom, it's also important to consider how information is communicated to students. And one way is to provide students with a note taker guide. This is a guide for students on peer note taking, organized by the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, that can be posted in Canvas or shared with specific peer note takers. It goes over 5 essential elements of being a peer note taker, including focusing on essential concepts and information, ensuring notes are legible and neat, uploading notes to a shared location within 24 to 48 hours, maintaining an organized labeling system, and communicating absences ahead of time. The intent is that students can refer back to this document and make sure that they are engaged in a successful peer note-taking process. Thank you so much for joining me in this review of various collaborative note-taking processes that can be used in the classroom. If you're interested in learning more about general teaching and learning ideas or want to explore note taking further, you can visit us at cedal.tcnj.edu or scan the QR code below to be brought to the website.